It's an absurdity. An alpha-decanted, alpha-conditioned man would go mad if he had to do epsilon semi-moron work. Go mad, or start smashing things up. Alphas can be completely socialized, but only on condition that you make them do alpha work. Only an epsilon can be expected to make epsilon sacrifices, for the good reason that for him they aren't sacrifices. They're the line of least resistance. His conditioning has laid down rails along which he's got to run. He can't help himself. He's foredoomed. Even after decanting, he's still inside a bottle, an invisible bottle of infantile and embryonic fixations. Each one of us, of course, the controller meditatively continued, goes through life inside a bottle. But if we happen to be alphas, our bottles are, relatively speaking, enormous. We should suffer acutely if we were confined in a narrower space. You cannot pour upper-caste champagne surrogate into lower-caste bottles. It's obvious theoretically, but it has also been proved in actual practice. The result of the Cyprus experiment was convincing. "What was that?" asked the savage. Mustafa Mond smiled. "Well, you can call it an experiment in rebottling, if you like. It began in AF 473. The controllers had the island of Cyprus cleared of all its existing inhabitants and recolonized with a specially prepared batch of 22,000 alphas. All agricultural and industrial equipment was handed over to them, and they were left to manage their own affairs. The results exactly fulfilled all the theoretical predictions. The land wasn't properly worked, there were strikes in all the factories, the laws were set at naught, orders disobeyed. All the people detailed for a spell of low-grade work were perpetually intriguing for high-grade jobs, and all the people with high-grade jobs were counter-intriguing at all costs to stay where they were. Within 6 years, they were having a first-class civil war. When 19 out of the 22,000 had been killed, the survivors unanimously petitioned the world controllers to resume the government of the island, which they did, and that was the end of the only society of alphas that the world has ever seen. The savage sighed profoundly. "The optimum population," said Mustafa Mond, "is modelled on the iceberg, 8/9 below the waterline, 1/9 above." "And they're happy below the waterline?" "Happier than above it. Happier than your friend here, for example." He pointed. "In spite of that awful work?" "Awful? They don't find it so. On the contrary, they like it. It's light. It's childishly simple. No strain on the mind or the muscles. 7.5 hours of mild, unexhausting labour, and then the soma ration, and games, and unrestricted copulation, and the feelies. What more can they ask for? True," he added, "they might ask for shorter hours, and of course we could give them shorter hours. Technically, it would be perfectly simple to reduce all lower-caste working hours to 3 or 4 a day. But would they be any the happier for that? No, they wouldn't. The experiment was tried more than a century and a half ago. The whole of Ireland was put on to the 4-hour day. What was the result? Unrest and a large increase in the consumption of soma. That was all. Those 3.5 hours of extra leisure were so far from being a source of happiness that people felt constrained to take a holiday from them. The Inventions Office is stuffed with plans for labour-saving processes, thousands of them." Mustafa Mond made a lavish gesture. "And why don't we put them into execution? For the sake of the labourers. It would be sheer cruelty to afflict them with excessive leisure. It's the same with agriculture. We could synthesize every morsel of food if we wanted to, but we don't. We prefer to keep 1/3 of the population on the land. For their own sakes, because it takes longer to get food out of the land than out of a factory. Besides, we have our stability to think of. We don't want to change. Every change is a menace to stability. That's another reason why we're so chary of applying new inventions. Every discovery in pure science is potentially subversive. Even science must sometimes be treated as a possible enemy. Yes, even science. Science? The savage frowned. He knew the word, but what it exactly signified he could not say. Shakespeare and the old men of the Pueblo had never mentioned science, and from Linda he had only gathered the vaguest hints. Science was something you made helicopters with, something that caused you to laugh at the corn dances, something that prevented you from being wrinkled and losing your teeth. He made a desperate effort to take the controller's meaning. "Yes," Mustafa Mond was saying, "that's another item in the cost of stability. It isn't only art that's incompatible with happiness, it's also science. Science is dangerous. We have to keep it most carefully chained and muzzled." "What?" said Helmholtz in astonishment. "But we're always saying that science is everything. It's a hypnopedic platitude." "3 times a week between 13 and 17, put in Bernard. "And all the science propaganda we do at the college—" "Yes, but what sort of science?" asked Mustafa Mond sarcastically. "You've had no scientific training, so you can't judge. I was a pretty good physicist in my time. Too good. Good enough to realize that all our science is just a cookery book, with an orthodox theory of cooking that nobody is allowed to question, and a list of recipes that mustn't be added to except by special permission from the head cook. I'm the head cook now, but I was an inquisitive young scullion once. I started doing a bit of cooking on my own. Unorthodox cooking, illicit cooking, a bit of real science, in fact." He was silent. "What happened?" asked Helmholtz Watson. The controller sighed. "Very nearly what's going to happen to you, young men. I was on the point of being sent to an island." The words galvanized Bernard into a violent and unseemly activity. "Send me to an island?" He jumped up, ran across the room, and stood gesticulating in front of the controller. "You can't send me! I haven't done anything! It was the others! I swear it was the others!" He pointed accusingly to Helmholtz and the savage. "Oh, please don't send me to Iceland! I promise I'll do what I ought to do. Give me another chance! Please give me another chance!" The tears began to flow. "I tell you it's their fault!" he sobbed. "And not to Iceland! Oh, please, your lordship, please!" And, in a paroxysm of abjection, he threw himself on the knees before the controller. Mustafa Mond tried to make him get up, but Bernard persisted in his grovelling. The stream of words poured out inexhaustibly. In the end, the controller had to ring for his 4th secretary. "Bring 3 men," he ordered, "and take Mr. Marks into a bedroom. Give him a good soma vaporization, and then put him to bed and leave him." The 4th secretary went out and returned with 3 green-uniformed twin footmen. Still shouting and sobbing, Bernard was carried out. "One would think he was going to have his throat cut," said the controller as the door closed. "Whereas, if he had the smallest sense, he'd understand that his punishment is really a reward. He's being sent to an island. That's to say, he's being sent to a place where he'll meet the most interesting set of men and women to be found anywhere in the world. All the people who, for one reason or another, have got too self-consciously individual to fit into community life. All the people who aren't satisfied with orthodoxy, who've got independent ideas of their own. Everyone, in a word, who's anyone. I almost envy you, Mr. Watson." Helmholtz laughed. "Then why aren't you on an island yourself?" "Because finally I preferred this," the controller answered. I was given the choice, to be sent to an island where I could have got on with my pure science, or to be taken on to the Controller's Council with the prospect of succeeding in due course to an actual controllership. I chose this, and let the science go.